Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cook, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more.
Hi, everyone. Michael Rochelle, Chief Strategy Officer, Principal Analyst at the Brandon Hall Group. It's great to see everyone again, and I had the unique fortune of being able to catch up with Pam Fuller from BTS, and I really wanted to sit down and have a really interesting conversation about what's going on with coaching. And I'm going to let Pam introduce herself, but there was just a very unique term that she used to catch my attention, and it was coaching is having a moment. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're gonna kind of figure out what that all means and what that all is as implications for us. It's going to be a very exciting conversation. So thanks, Pam, for joining me, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about you and your organization.
For sure. So my name is Pamela Fuller. I'm a vice president at BTS in the Executive Coaching Center of Excellence. So it works in my favor that coaching is having a moment. And BTS is a global consulting firm focused on the people side of strategy. And we essentially support any component of the talent lifecycle. We've really intentionally built our capabilities to support anything that has to do with people, and coaching is a big part of that. And so we have a robust coaching capability from individual contributors all the way through the CEO that I'm really passionate about. And I've been here just about a year after a long career focused on talent and strategy and coaching and diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is actually what sort of brought me to coaching. I was really inspired by the power of coaching to help leaders make difficult changes or things that they felt uncomfortable about. So that's what brought me here to focus on coaching, and that's what BTS does.
Let's jump in. So there was I'm just going to quote you again. You said there are a ton of vendors doing everything from AI coaching to very senior executive and CEO coaching, and many platforms that say they do coaching. I've heard the word ton used so many times, but I think you finally were the first person I've met that uses it the way it's intended. There is a real weight to this, the amount of choices and things you have to work through and the permutations. There's a lot of complexity and difficulty with getting coaching off the ground and doing it right. But it begs the question is, how do you define coaching? How do we get everybody thinking about coaching the right way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a weight to it because it's a significant investment, but also it's a significant investment in people's time, right? Leaders are spending time on coaching. It's not a sort of quick fix intervention, and there's lots of people putting their brain space behind trying to figure out how to make it most effective. But really, at its core, our approach to coaching and our philosophy is really aligned with the ethics, guidelines, and values of the International Coaching Federation, the ICF, the sort of global body responsible for coaching. And we define coaching as a partnership of equals, where the leader is really bringing their domain expertise in their role, themselves, their teams, their organizational strategy, whatever their functional expertise is, right? And the coach is bringing expertise in the art and science of coaching. And the art is the trust and vulnerability necessary to get to a meaningful relationship. But the science is really everything that goes into a coaching certification. And that's why coaching certifications matter. It's all of the neuroscience and the science of habit formation. And how is it that people respond to change? And how does behavior shift, right? And so in that partnership, the coach is really supporting the leader in answering 5 fairly simple questions about themselves and the work that they're doing. The first is, who am I as a leader, right? What's my point of view, my biases, my preferences, my strengths, my opportunities? The second is, how am I impacting the people and the business around me. And that's sort of, how do I think I'm impacting? But like, also, what are they saying? Like, how am I impacting the people in business around me? The third is, how do I want to impact the humans and the business around me, right? Like, what is the business need for me and what's my vision? The fourth is, what are the barriers? What's getting in the way of current state and future state? And the final question is really, how do I navigate a path to overcome those barriers and achieve the impact that I want to in the humans and the business around me? And so people think of coaching as sort of sometimes therapeutic or like squishy, but for our, strategic operational leaders we're supporting, this very clear path feels logical to them. We are navigating a path from where you are today to where you'd like to go.
That's outstanding. I don't think anyone has been that articulate about explaining what it is and what it's not. Let's go further. So we were talking about coaching, and now that we have a good sense of what the premise is, how do you decide if it's right for you? I think you use the term intervention. Like, how do you know that coaching is the right intervention? How do you make that decision?
Yeah. Intervention for all our OD folks, right? Like, how do we select the intervention? So I think, very simply put, coaching is an effective intervention or an effective thing to draw upon, resource to draw upon when you are trying to change behavior. Okay. So there's some interesting research that very much inspires BTS's work around vertical development versus horizontal development. And so this idea that like the more senior you get, the more that the thing you need to work on is not actually capability or sort of competency, but it's actually capacity. Right? How do I as a leader increase my capacity to navigate everything that I'm responsible for? Because as you grow as a leader, right, your scope and scale and complexity is increasing. Right. So how do you increase your capacity to handle all of those things? And so coaching is very focused on what are the behaviors I need to change to get to that increased capacity. And so if you are experiencing a change, whether that is like a change in role or scope or remit, a change in function, or even just navigating an organizational change, right? Like there's been an M&A or there's a reorg or there's something changing about our business. We sort of think about all of the oil and gas we're working with that is sort of changing to energy, or you think about the automotive industry that is changing to electric, right? Like these sort of industry changes, but they require something different of us. And a coach can be really helpful in not just making the changes, but also even understanding what is it that this change requires from me and what mindsets do I have that might be holding me back or making it challenging for me to meet that moment.
That's an excellent point. All of it was great. That last 10 seconds brought home. Now you can see the connection between what coaching is, and you said it's about behavioral change, but now you've made a direct connection as to when do you need that behavioral change. And I love the term capacity, and it's not just about learning skills, or like having to learn something that new, but just seeing if you can get more out of yourself. And that does require like a behavioral change. Most of us, I think, in the audience know that we probably made our biggest jumps in life, not learning something new, but saying our behavior has to change in order to address the new need. And I think that's a great way to describe it. So as we kind of move through the process, let's talk about the difference between internal, external coaching. We work with a lot of organizations try to do this on their own, try to figure it out. There's a lot of challenges with doing that. And so they end up saying, I need a great partner. I need someone to. So describe, for the audience, like what is a great coaching partner? How do you know? Like, what do you ask? What should you look for? What defines, especially, let's say if we just were listening to this and say, for the first time, I truly understand what coaching is. I finally understand when I'm supposed to use it. How do you take that now and like translate it into the criteria for a good partner?
Yeah. I mean, clearly I'm totally biased in this, right? I think we're a good
See,
partner.
I wonder.
But I think maybe the caveat I would put there is that, I joined this team very intentionally about a year ago. And I was looking for like, what is a high quality, meaningful coaching vendor doing? Right. And as we have done this work for the last 20 plus years, there are a couple things that have stood out. So the first is I think coaching is a place where reps matter. So
Mm.
lots of people, because coaching is having a moment, lots of people are getting certified, right? And they are pursuing rigorous programs, myself included, right? Like they are getting certified and then they sort of come out of that and they're, well, I'm a coach, I'm a certified coach, right? Um, but it's a bit like, I don't know if anyone who's listening, if you've got kids, right? I have 3 kids, and the way that I parented my first kid is different than how I've parented my third kid. Not because like I like him less, but because I know better, right? Like trial and error, there's a lot I've learned about parenting. And I think coaching is similar. So there's lots of people who are doing coaching as like a side thing or something they
Hmm.
have passion around, and that's amazing. And it means that they get less reps, right? And so the sort of scope of challenges they've navigated or things they've helped leaders with is a narrower pool of things. And so depth is something that really matters. So you should be asking your coaching vendor how many years of full-time experience coaching at the level that you're looking for have your coaches, right? If they are part-time coaching or just new to coaching, that's significant because they might, to your point about internal coaches, sometimes that means you might be better served with an internal cadre. I think rigor is really important. So you
Mm.
get certified and you have supervision initially if you're ICF certified, and your supervisor is really keeping you sort of on the path, right, in alignment with ICF. And so year over year, as you move away from supervision, you might also sort of move like 1 degree over. So rigor is important. We recertify our coaches annually. And we have, for our scaled coaching offering, which we can talk about those distinctions, supervisors, right? So those coaches are receiving supervision. And so that rigor is really important. So you should be asking your provider, how do they ensure that their coaches didn't just make the team, but continue to maintain the standard of the team? What kind of professional development and growth opportunities and supervision do their coaches have? And how rigorous is their initial intake process? Because one of the things about high growth is sometimes organizations find themselves in a position where they're onboarding coaches to meet demand versus upholding a really rigorous process. And then maybe the final thing I would say is multiple approaches, right? Like in
Mm.
your initial question, you mentioned there's AI coaching, there's very high touch senior executive and CEO coaching, there's scaled and democratized coaching platforms. I think what is challenging at the space is that when you are a hammer, everything is a nail.
Hmm.
And so if you are an AI coaching provider, then every problem can be solved with AI coaching. If you are a democratized coaching provider, every problem can be solved with that. And again, high end. At BTS, we have all 3 capabilities, recognizing that what you're trying to achieve, the level of behavior change or the level of leader, determine the modality or the approach that is most effective. And so we have a VP Plus offering that is very high touch and white glove, leader led in terms of coach selection. We have a scaled and democratized offering that's really focused on individual contributors, first and mid-level leaders, on the specific mindset shifts and behaviors that they need to onboard. And then we have an emerging and growing AI capability that is really supporting human coaching with the practice part. So like the question is, what can AI do to maximize investment and minimize the human part, recognizing that there's still stuff that humans have to do. And there's some interesting research that's come out recently to that end.
What I love about what you said, Pam, I was picking up on words like approaches, rigor, reps, is, and maybe just kind of distilling a couple things down. This isn't like technology where you could build something once and it could be cutting edge. Like, this is back to, you got to have a lot of at bats. You've had to have done this a lot of times in a lot of different ways and a lot of different settings. Would it be fair to say that someone looking for a good partner should ask about that, like expertise and experience. So you're saying like how many times across how many different maybe subjects or approaches you've taken and all of this, and what do you do to stay, on top of your profession, so to speak, like these certifications and the rigor as you put. I think that's a really important point for the audience because I think a lot of buyers that are out there, we've kind of rooted ourselves in tech buying, and it's like whoever's got the fanciest and the latest, and me, I could be the first one using it. But now with something like this gets back to the fundamentals of experience and expertise, which I love. That kind of breaks us out of that, that way that we're thinking now. Uh, Kind of getting back to the intimacy of the coaching relationship, you know, what is, what do you need to look for in a coach? If you're a leader, like what are you looking for in a coach?
I think a lot of leaders select coaches based on bios.
Mm. Mm.
So,
Okay.
well, they'll look at a bio and they want to see certain titles. They write, like, if I'm a CFO, I want a coach who's been a CFO or has financial acumen experience. They're looking at their like academic credentials and the prestige of that, or the logos that they've worked in or
Right.
for.
Right.
So I think sometimes, not all the time, but I think sometimes leaders are looking at their coach selection as an exercise in prestige. So like, I want to get the
Mm.
most prestigious coach.
Right.
When what they should, I mean, so much of the coaching experience lives off the page, right? So like, you could read my bio. It's great, right? I'm a published author. I've worked
Sure.
in talent for most of my career. I've worked for some big sort of brand names in talent. I've also done some work with the Department of Defense, which is always, right, interesting. My bio tells you what I've done and where I have expertise. It doesn't tell you very much about what it's like to have a conversation with Pamela.
Right. Right.
And so I mean, we have to narrow from somewhere, right? Like, you wouldn't necessarily have 100 fit conversations with different coaches. But I think as a leader is exploring coaches, what they should be asking is, what does it feel like to be coached by you?
Mm. Okay.
Right? Are you a coach who brings a lot of levity to the situation? And does that work for me? Do I want to experience a lot of challenge? Am I sort of a structural thinker, and I need a coach who is structural as well and very like practical and tactical in what they're giving me? And so I think it's important for leaders to think about, what is it that I need to make change? Like, when I think about coaches I've worked with previously, or leaders I've worked for, colleagues, right? Like, what are the things that are helpful to me in navigating change, or helpful to me in making change, right? You think of sort of the best professor you ever had and what was true there.
Mm-hmm.
And then really asking the coach what it feels like to be coached from them, and if they can meet these things that are important to you. So I think the first line is qualifications. Like, of course, they should be certified, right? They should have achieved certification from a rigorous program. They should have years of experience coaching at the senior leader level, if you're a senior leader, or at the first line leader level, right? They should sort of have expertise in the circumstance and in the art and science of coaching. And then the double click is like, what does it feel like to engage in conversation with them? Is this a person that could really help me and support me? Would I feel trust and vulnerability with them to drive change? So part of our process at the senior level, especially, is actually to have more of an intake conversation to really get at what is important to this leader. How do they make meaning? What will be substantial for them in terms of behavior change? And then provide them with some coach candidates for fit calls that meet those criteria.
So I love about what you said is you just bridged like what you mean by different approaches to the experience itself. And that was outstanding because I was living that as you were saying. I'm thinking, yeah, how do you know whether they're going to be a good coach for you without working with them yet? And I love how you kind of distilled it down to like asking the coach, like, what type of experience am I going to have with you? Like, what do you leverage? Like, basically, like, how do you approach this? Levity, seriousness, asking a lot of questions, pensive. I love that because people that allows a leader to be able to have criteria, something they can go into without having to feel like, well, I won't find out whether I like this coach enough for like 3 or 4 sessions. That's great stuff. You can just visualize having that conversation. It's like screening the coach in a way, right? For whether or not they're a good fit.
Yeah. And in a way that's effective, right? Like there's a time crunch that everybody feels in terms of what they're required to do every day. So you sort of cut some of the time out.
So I hate to always ask this question, but it's just such a corporate imperative these days. Like, what's the data point to in coaching? What are the success stories? What's the ROI? What could you share with all the work that you and your organization has done? Where can we leave HR professionals listening to this on the business impact and ROI of coaching?
Yeah. So I think when we talk about data, there's two things to consider. There is the inputs, right? And then there's the outputs. And so I think it is really beneficial to have some input data in the coaching experience. So is that, a 360 or psychometric or feedback exercise? Most of the work we do, we use an interview-based 360 because we're very focused on ensuring that the leader has specific behavioral feedback that is driving their coaching objectives, and sort of going back to those 5 questions, answering that second question of how am I impacting the humans in business around me today, right? And we opt for an interview-based 360 to ensure that there's meaningful input into the coaching engagement.
Okay.
We also include alignment meetings to kick off and close the engagement. And that is typically the leader, their coach, their manager, and HR partner. There are vendors who actually say they intentionally don't do this because they want to maintain safety and confidentiality. What we would argue is that because this is something the business is paying for, and because the purpose of coaching as an intervention is to drive specific behavior change, it is critical that the manager and HR partner be involved to articulate what is it that we need to see from this leader. And so I think it drives and deepens engagement to have those inputs. So that's an important piece, because I think we will often, you've met leaders or you've met sort of managers and even HR partners who say, like, we've given this person a ton of feedback and they're not changing.
Right.
And the question we would ask is, like, do you know many leaders who just like never want to change? I mean, they're going to work every day trying to do a good job. And so for whatever reason, that feedback is not resonating, likely because it is not specific and behavioral, or it's not coming from a source that they trust. Right.
Right.
So that's an important component. Now, when we think of sort of the outputs of coaching, there's a few things that I think are important measurement and data points. The baseline is sort of satisfaction, NPS, and experience, right? Like, was this a valuable experience? Is this something you would recommend to a colleague? That should be incredibly high. The next is, did you complete your objectives? So we've identified coaching as the thing to drive behavior change. What are the behavior changes required of you? Those were aligned upon to start the engagement. And so did we complete those objectives? Because they're typically tied to some strategic priority, right? And so I think as a business, I think sometimes, to your point about tech, we sort of lose that part. Like, right. But the tech says people had a great experience. It's driving a sense of well-being and employee engagement, which are valuable things. But we're also often making this investment in leaders because we need them to do a strategic thing. And that is ultimately having, really strong impact on the business. So we're very focused on that sort of qualitative measure of, like, did the leader move from X to Y in the period that we were coaching with them. There's also some interesting, like, when coaching is part of your culture and you're coaching larger groups of people, there's really interesting data insights that can come from that. So what are the themes that leaders are coming to coaching with? And are those aligned with what, the talent team and HR team and the C-suite say are the priorities for the business, or the predominant challenges
Mm-hmm.
in the business. So I think coaching is very much a give and take in terms of data. So there's all this data we get at the front end that is really helpful to understanding what it is we're trying to solve for. Then there's actually solving for that thing. And then there's all the ways that coaching can provide a talent team or a leadership team with data and insights that really gives them visibility into their business that they wouldn't have otherwise.
You know, what you just described, I think, meets all the criteria for being able to evaluate coaching properly. I mean, I think you met the business requirements. You've also met the interpersonal requirements. But I love that idea of that there's inputs and outputs and what's the relationship between the two and and all of it's important in order to be able to show what coaching can do both on a personal level and also performance level within the organization. It was very easy to follow. And thanks for all of this. I mean, this could have been gone from a podcast to a workshop. I mean, this is great. Like anyone who listens to this, reads the transcript, boy, you can go from everything that you need to know, figuring out a great partner, what coaching is and isn't, when to use it, how to be able to find a great coach, experience that good coaching, and then what does it take, from inputs and outputs to make it happen properly. That is really a lesson learned for today. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for the thoughtful questions.
Well, this is Michael Rochelle from Brandon Hall Group again, signing off. Thanks again, and look forward, Pam, to catching up on some additional changes and how this thing all evolves over time. We'll be back in touch with you soon.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.